Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called Spears of Heaven, written by hixchem. Andan stood at the edge of the field, staring out at the vast, dead wastes before him. Behind him lay a long trail composed of small, raised platforms that he could hop between. He was proud of them. His ingenious little steps that allowed easy movement across the fields without damaging any of the still fragile new plant growth. They had enabled him to expand his field far more quickly than his counterparts. Mandy's recent reports had gotten him some attention in the ranks. More than a few other terraformers on other worlds had sent him communications with the weekly data streams to ask for his divine specs and any other information he could provide. His work with the Galethani Terraforming Ministry was important, he knew. Every colony had 6 individuals just like him. Each one was tasked with expanding the life-sustaining ground along 1/6 of the edge of each colony. Terraformers all worked hard, secure in the knowledge that every foot of ground gained could potentially support another family in the colony. With enough expansion, biodiversity could begin to be incorporated, and with a little luck, the terraforming process would become self-sustaining as life simply started pushing across the planet, as all life eventually did. The difficult part was always between the arrival of the first colonists and the time when terraforming took over for itself. There were mouths to feed almost immediately, and the survival of the colony invariably depended on those 6 individuals who were capable of handling the job. Andan enjoyed his work, enjoyed working out the best planting distances between each of the precious seeds in his possession, and certainly enjoyed seeing the fruits of his labors at the frequent colony gatherings. He may not have been a Galatani biologically, but he felt these colonists had made him one of their family all the same. He shifted his foot in the barren dirt until he felt it brush against a tiny leaf belonging to one of his most recent successes. From there, he paced off steps, placing the back of one foot against the front of the other, moving carefully forward and counting the steps. After 12 steps, he held his foot still and pulled a marking flag from his pack. He pressed the metal into the ground against his foot, then pulled it away and began clearing the area. He shoved loose rocks and pebbles, taking care to leave as much of the fine dust behind as possible. Once the larger pieces had been cleared away, he pulled out a small brush and began sweeping it back and forth over the area, smoothing out the fine particles and leveling the ground as much as possible. Satisfied with the area, he removed the marker flag and scooped out a small space into the dust. Gingerly, he placed a single seed into the cavity and lightly pressed the dust back over it. He pressed a small portion of active soil on the spot and poured a measure of water on it, then stood up and admired his handiwork. If the spot took just like the others, he'd see a sprout in a few days' time. He wiped his brow and looked back towards the main colony. Shocked, he saw what looked like small Galatani children, hopping from step to step across his field, attempting to balance themselves together in a single pad, and falling off into the field, laughing all the while. He broke into a run towards them, waving his arms at them and shouting, "Don't move! You'll damage the sprouts!" he cried, as he bounded expertly from one step to the next. 2 of them looked up at him as he approached and immediately dashed off, stomping sprouts with reckless abandon as they did. A 3rd one paused long enough to sneer at him. "Who cares, Steelo? Your dumb sprouts are just more garbage from garbage people," the child spat before running off after his friends. Andan moved between his platforms, reaching down to check the sprouts the children had damaged. Several of them had been ripped and crushed into the ground, and he knew that they were beyond saving. At least, he'd be able to use their biomatter as a base for another attempt. Not until he had checked and noted every damaged sprout did he even stop to think about what the child had been shouting. Skilo? Where would the child have heard such a horrible word? Why hurl that abuse at me, and what was that about my people being garbage? Andan sat on a platform near the colony and pondered it for a while. The light began to fade as the local star rotated below the horizon, and Andan rose to his feet and made his way to his residence. He pushed the door open and stepped inside. Andan set his tools and bag down on the small table and crawled into his bed. He knew that he was different from the Galatani. Being a different species had never been an issue before, and yet this child's use of the old filthy word had shaken him to his core. I thought our races were past such things. We settled that war thousands of years ago, when my race was brutish and cruel, and the Galatani had been merciful in their victory. We're all supposed to be friends now. Andan turned over and pulled the thin blanket across his torso. He fell asleep quickly, and didn't notice the blinking blue light on his personal communicator. The next morning, Andan awoke to shouts and screams from outside. Throwing off his blanket, he ran to the door. Although the local star had already risen high in the sky, it was dark outside. The light was blocked by a massive object Andan had never seen before, and he felt the ground rumbling beneath his feet as the object grew larger and moved closer. A high-pitched chirp from inside his home caught his attention, and he ran back inside. His communicator was blinking rapidly and chirping at him. He flipped it open and accepted the incoming comlink. "Andan!" shouted a familiar voice through the static-filled view screen. "If you can hear me, switch your transponder to maximum gain immediately." Andan flipped through the settings of his communicator and adjusted it as instructed. Then he brought the comlink back to the forefront. Static had been replaced by the face of his friend and fellow Kalurian, Madrak. "Madrak, I can see you. Can you hear me?" Andan shouted over the rumbling. "I can hear you and see you, Andan. Listen, we don't have much time for small talk, so tell me quickly, are you on Extract C12 right now?" "Madrak, what's going on?" "Andan, I need to know now." "Yes, I'm on Extract C12. Why? What's happening?" Madrak turned to something out of view and shouted, "Wait, there's a Kalurian down there. Lock onto his coordinates through his active comlink and get him out." Half a second later, Andan felt unimaginable pain as every molecule in his body was ripped apart and obliterated, then experienced it all over again as each molecule fell back into position 500,000 kilometers above, in the heart of an object he'd just been watching. A door hissed open to his right, and he was greeted by Madrak. "Andan, my old friend, stay still. Don't try and move just yet. The reintegration is rough the first few times. Your consciousness hasn't yet come to terms with what it experienced. Just take slow breaths and listen." Andan, who felt paralyzed, remained motionless on the floor, staring at Madrak. Madrak seated himself on the floor beside Andan and continued. "The Galatani attempted to annex Kalur, citing imminent domain because so many Kalurians already work on Galatani worlds. When the Kalurian Council refused to accept the annexation, the Galatani attacked from orbit. About 2/3 of the population of Kela was killed. They sent out a distress call to anyone who might help us." Madrak took a deep breath as Andan found his fine motor control coming back. Andan pushed himself up to a seated position. He could not yet bring himself to speak. "I don't think anyone in Kela could have expected our signal to even be heard by the humans, let alone answered. 3 days after the Galatani attacked us, the Galactic Council received a message from the depths of space." Andan coughed and croaked. "What did it say?" "We will pierce the flesh of demons with the spears of heaven." "What does that mean?" It wasn't clear until a few days after that. 4 Titan-class ships were spotted over the outermost colonies of the Galatani Empire. They were roughly cone-shaped, but they were massive. They didn't seem to have come from anywhere. They just somehow appeared. And, in a single moment, all 4 ships fell into the colonies. The Galatani received transmissions from those colonies that all non-Galatani individuals had vanished. And then all transmissions stopped. As far as the Galatani knew, these ships simply started jamming communications. So they sent a few scouts out to those colonies to see what was happening. The scout ships managed to transmit the same images from all 4 colonies. Andan's eyes went up. Madrak soldiered on. The unknown ships had dropped into the planets and pierced their crusts, destroying the settlements entirely. Just before the scout ships were destroyed as well, one managed to get an image of the Titan class lifting back off the planet. Andan pushed himself to his feet, and Mandrak followed. Mardrak, where are we? What is this place? Mardrak beckoned to Andan, and Andan fell in step behind him. As they walked, Mardrak explained. This is the human ship Gabriel. It is one of their biggest ships. They pulled me and the others off the Setanor before they destroyed the colony there. Mardrak turned the corner and tapped a control pad on the wall. A screen lit up before him, showing the face of a creature Andan had never seen. Mardrak addressed the image. Captain Jacobs, I can confirm the only Kalurian on Extract C-12 is secure, sir. The screen spoke back. Very good. Mr. Mardrak, is that him? Andan took a step back, but Mardrak caught him. Hi, Captain. This is Andan. The captain nodded once. Welcome aboard, Mr. Andan. You and Mr. Mardrak should get yourselves situated quickly, and once the incursion is complete, he can take you to personnel and get everything squared away. G'day. The image immediately went to black. Andan pointed at where the captain's face had been. Was that a human? He demanded in a harsh whisper. Mardrak grabbed his hand and pulled him along the corridor towards a row of seats with heavy restraints over them. Yep, that was a human. There's a lot on the ship. Several other individuals, including some that looked like Captain Jacobs, were taking seats as well. Mardrak pushed Andan into a seat and joined him in the adjacent one. On his other side, a human with long brown hair tied in a series of knots sat down. He pulled the restraints down, then checked Andan's and Mardrak's. A rumbling sound began to fill the ship. The human shouted over the noise. One of your friends, Mardrak. Andan looked to Mardrak, who was holding his thumb upward. Andan felt a nudge on his shoulder and looked back at the human. Its face was closer to his, and all its teeth were bared. He pulled back as far as the restraints would allow. It spoke to him. I'm Amy, it shouted. First time on a human vessel? Andan nodded hesitantly. Boy, did you pick the right kind of ship for the first time? A rumbling increased in volume, and the seat began to shake around Andan. Amy yelled louder, and Andan was able to pick out the words. Listen, I know this is going to be scary for you, but don't worry. You'll be fine. Just hang in there, and we'll be planetside in a jiffy. Andan nodded again, then turned and faced the open corridor. A voice came over the loudspeaker, drowning out the rumbling. All crew, brace for incursion in 10, 9, 8. Andan closed his eyes and gripped his seat. 7, 6, 5, 4. Amy let out a yell, holding a fist in the air. To Andan's surprise, Mardrak joined in the yelling. 3. Andan started screaming. The rumbling reached a maximum, and Andan thought the ship would rip itself apart. There was a jolt, then rumbling faded away. The sound of hissing gases caught his attention, and he saw the restraints begin popping up and lifting away from the seats. The voice returned over the loudspeaker. Incursion complete. All crew begin post-incursion internal checks and prepare for departure at 0800. Amy stood up from the seat and helped Andan from his. What just happened? Screamed Andan. Amy took a deep breath. The Gelatani have shown themselves to be willing to commit genocide against other races in order to get their worlds they want. Genocide against your race, specifically. And they damn near did it too. Your people called out for help, and we had to help. Okay, Andan carried on. But what had actually happened just now with the ship? Amy knelt down and brought her own face level with Andan's. We killed them all. We cannot allow genocide to go unpunished, but don't worry. Once our work is done, the Gelatani worlds will be turned over to the Galactic Council for multi-species colonization. Amy tapped the control pad on the wall and pulled up a view of outside of the ship. Look, some of the plant life on the edge of the colony survived. That'll make terraforming really easy later, with an established biological foothold. Here, take a look. Amy stepped aside, and Andan saw his own field of plants, slightly dusty now, but ultimately unharmed. And Dan looked up at Amy. You're going to kill all the Galantani because they attacked my world. You're going to wipe them out. Amy heard the question, hidden in the words. We won't be committing our own genocide. We'll be taking back every colony planet in the Galactic Empire, and once we blockade their homeworld, that'll be it. In time, they'll be able to try existing on a galactic stage again. But for now, they have to learn the hard lesson. And Dan looked back at the screen, back at the dusty little plant that he'd helped grow, and wondered how many more people would die. End of story. I would just like to thank the T5 supporters: Bushmaster117, Casper Arnholtz, Drexzoon WRE, Elijah Silvercross, Gray, John Carrington, and Severin Cerberus. Thank you very much.